Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Buddhist Biohacker, and welcome to our second episode of our three-part series, The Shadow Side of Resilience, with myself and my colleague, Julie Hoyle. Welcome back, Julie.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. I really enjoyed our conversation last week, and I know a lot of you did because we got a lot of great comments and questions from people about this. And Michelle, welcome in. Hey, Michelle. Everybody's from, say hi, share how you're feeling, and please feel free to comment or ask questions all throughout the show. We love the live interaction, and I see my little live audience numbers ticking up. So welcome in, everybody, and thanks for joining us. So I'll kick it off, Julie, with just saying today we are going to talk about the weight of endurance. So last week we talked about the mask of resilience, and this week we're going to talk about the cost of being the strong one. And I've got a quote for you to kick it off, which is, "Strength can become your mask, so polished, so practiced that no one sees when you're silently crumbling behind it." And within that, there's a loneliness that comes from being the dependable one, the strong one, the emotional weight of not being allowed to fall apart. And oftentimes, folks don't show up for you because you're the strong one. So that's what we're talking about today, kicking it off.
Yeah, that's a great theme. And I've got a story. If you don't mind me starting with that, I think it would be good. So, excuse me, I've been a part of a spiritual community here in Nassau since 1989. So, do the math, right? It's a long time. The group isn't that big, but there's a core group, and I've always been, I guess, because I'm a kind of mystic by nature and a contemplative. I've always been very sort of deeply oriented towards supporting people to awaken to the truth of who they are, trust their intuition, and do whatever I can to support and help people, specifically the people in the community. And what happened is in 2000, and I think it was 16, when my husband and I were living on Grand Bahama, we were facing a really life-threatening situation, a medical situation. And I won't go into the details, but we had to be, airlifted. Well, my husband had to be airlifted and, ended up in a hospital in Florida. And, I was essentially there on my own. But, because of my deep connection with the self, I was getting guidance and I felt really supported from within. At the same time, it's very helpful when people reach out to offer support, even if it's just to say, look, I'm really sorry, I don't know what to do. If I can help in any way, let me know. I'm holding you in my prayers and all of those things. So all of that said, angels showed up, which was great. But many people from the spiritual community that I belong to didn't say a word, didn't send a message, didn't reach out in any way, shape, or form. And the thing that saddened me, it wasn't even that I was personally affronted by it, but it just saddened me. I said, gosh, all these years, decades that I've known these people, and they are meant to be kind of stalwart, strong, spiritually connected, kind of highly evolved. And they weren't aware enough to know that it's important to reach out when someone is in difficulty, whether it's physical difficulty, emotional, financial, whatever the story is, with respect to really honoring humanity. Because it's all well and good, saying that you're highly evolved, but if you don't show up for family members or friends when they're facing difficult times, I think it's kind of useless. It's a waste of time, because you can be as evolved as you want, but if you can't support other people, then what's the point? So that was a real eye-opener. So I began to see that there's a lot of kind of persona and masks as well in the spiritual community. And I really saw that some people were just what I'd call fair weather spiritual friends who really did not know how to offer support during difficult times.
Yeah, that's challenging. And what would you say, because I think both you and I have had folks who have come to us frustrated with things like that. Like how did you navigate that? Was there anything you did or said, or what's the advice there? Because I know that a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just never going to talk to them again because they didn't talk to me, or there's all that. So I'm just curious, like what that looks like for people who are struggling with something like that.
Well, two things. One is that, first of all, like I said, angels showed up, friends of friends that I didn't even know. There was one person in Florida who lived close to where the hospital was, who was actually a friend of a friend in Freeport. And my friend in Freeport contacted this lady. This lady came and took me out for lunch, took me to a food store so I could, get groceries. We became friends. I mean, it just was wonderful. I was getting phone calls from people that I barely knew, who weren't part of the spiritual community. And so those kinds of connections really supported me, and it felt wonderful. And then I realized that what I would call the spiritual fair weather friends had always just been showing up when I was available for them and when I was offering them support or giving them a quick read on something. And so I created boundaries, and I closed some of them, not out of anger, but I just kind of pulled away and created space. And interestingly, those people never reached out and said, did I do something to hurt you or offend you, or, because that's what I would do if I considered somebody a friend. So I really saw even more clearly that they really weren't friends. So the advice I would give is to nurture and nourish the friendships and the friends, particularly, that who have your back no matter what, through thick and thin. Really support and honor them, and just be mindful about not always being the one that calls, that offers, that supports, because it's not that we're doing that to get something back, but in a healthy relationship, there's give and take. There's this exchange, an energy exchange. And if there isn't, then what you're doing is you're just kind of feeding somebody and supporting somebody who has vampiric energy, and it's not good for you, and it's not good for that person either.
Agreed. Hearing your story brings to mind, for me, when I was going through my divorce years and years ago, having clients who were pretty judgmental and harsh about me dating and being like a human being. And I think there's an interesting, and I don't think it's just spiritual communities. And I think in spiritual communities, sometimes it's magnified,
yes,
more so than normal life. But just like you're
sure.
saying, there was this, it wasn't even just that I was the strong, connected spiritual one, but it was this almost an expectation that I would be in this pure sattvic state all of the time, and that I wasn't allowed or given space to be a human being too. And so I think this idea of always being strong and always being capable, or I'm the spiritual connected teacher, you're not allowed to be a human being. I think that's a dangerous thing that happens too with people that are strong and focused. It's like, well, why are you even focusing on that? And it's like, well, that's part of the human experience. It's part of my life.
Yes.
It can be really challenging.
Yeah. And, the same holds true when it comes to gurus or spiritual teachers. They can be placed on such a high pedestal by aspirants, by seekers, that the seekers don't recognize that the guru is in a physical body, in a physical form, and is dealing with the same things that you and I are dealing with. And there's really no difference. The only difference is the guru or the enlightened master recognizes I am the supreme self, but at the same time, they're honoring their physical needs, the authentic expression of what that means, taking care of their health and doing all those things. So it can become a little bit distorted, the whole kind of guru on a pedestal orientation, if you're not careful.
Yeah, agreed. I always point everyone to, there's a video on YouTube where the Dalai Lama talks about, it's jealous bird video is what you're going to search up. Dalai Lama, jealous bird. But I heard him tell that story live. And I mean, all these years later, I still point to that because he talked about how jealous he was that his pet bird did not like him. It liked his teacher and it would bite him and he would get mad at it. But it just is that humanity, understanding. I love that story because it's teaching us that they're human beings. Like all of us are human beings having a human experience. No matter how enlightened we are, we have these other experiences, and it can be incredibly isolating when people in your community think you shouldn't be part of something. That's a very human thing to be a part of. It can be really challenging.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's, that also includes things like what you should and shouldn't eat, and what you should and shouldn't drink. I mean, years ago in the Bahamas, there was, I can't remember the name of the teacher, but there was a teacher that came into town who was advocating putting bottled water outside in the sunlight for several hours to magnetize it and do whatever, and drink it and go, walk outside barefoot. And only there was a period when there was a macrobiotic kind of phase here in Nassau where everybody was trying their best to be macrobiotic because it was supposed to kind of elevate your path and your spiritual kind of connectivity and all of those things, it has its place and it's fun, I think, to explore those things. And sometimes those things fit, it fits your body style, body type. But I remember just feeling like I was floating out of my body all the time on this very sort of pure macrobiotic diet, and I was losing weight, and it just really wasn't sitting well with me. And at least I had the sense, I kind of connected in and said, is this right? And I got the answer, no, you need to, eat differently. But, and interestingly, I cover this subject in the book I was telling you about, in Enlightenment Myth Busting, because I've come across many people who have had life-threatening, conditions. And they've tried, cancer being one of them, and they've tried to heal it through just eating, pure, clean vegetables, fresh vegetables that aren't cooked, brown rice, and just really trying to sort of eat this very pure diet. And I think all of that has its place and it's great, and I'm not condemning it in any way. But this particular person that I'm thinking about just didn't seek medical advice, she went to a retreat center in Florida, which cost a lot of money, where the focus was on essentially macrobiotic diet and, pure foods and all of that, alkaline diet. And again, it has its benefits, but she didn't seek any other sort of allopathic treatments. And then by the time, the cancer had progressed, and then it was really too late. They told her that she'd left it too late and the cancer was coming through the breast. Who's to say whether or not, conventional medicine would have helped her, but I think it would have helped alleviate the pain, and she was essentially trying to sort that out herself. So there needs, and this was a consequence of being, doing research, being told what she should do, going against, and I think she intuitively felt that it wasn't helping, but she was determined to just keep seeing it through. And in the end, it had a really detrimental effect. So, all of these things are really important, that we really have to listen to our own inner guidance and to ask, when we need help as well, because that's the other side of what we're talking about here, right? Not feel like you're so lofty and above everything. You shouldn't be having these physical conditions or situations that you're dealing with.
Well, right. It's like understanding that you don't have to be the strong one and can ask for help for yourself. And also just knowing that you can be spiritual and you can be a wreck at the exact same time. And, you know, Ananda Mahima, I'm reading one of her books that someone wrote with her quotes and memoirs. And she talks about the sacredness of destruction and, you know, illness and what that does to you, and that is sacred too. And so it's really keeping in mind that we're here to experience the full spectrum of human emotion, the destructive emotions. And like you said in your book, that good vibes myth, right? Like that idea that everything's positive and everything's perfect. And, you know, there's that toxic positivity, you know, that's the part that gets really, and it becomes emotionally exhausting to try to be like that all the time. I'm very intense, so I'm probably too much the other way. But because of that thought, like, oh, I'm too intense, I need to be positive. So then I start focusing on that. And it is really exhausting to be positive all the time.
Yes.
It is hard.
It is. And it's really bullshit at the end of the day. It really is. It's just fakery. It's spiritual fakery, because the thing is that when, and, you know, again, I really encourage this, if anger comes up, for example, or frustration or irritation, instead of thinking, you know, I shouldn't be feeling this way because I'm a spiritual person, instead just stop and say, okay, why am I feeling crappy? What is this all about? Just look and see, you know, what is it here to teach us, to show us? Because there's always usually something that is underlying that feeling. Sometimes there isn't too, but you can at least say, okay, welcome. Crappiness is here, or irritation or frustration is here. It's okay. It's not a measure of your spiritual attainment, because the supreme self, is supremely free. It is here prior to the story, and any movement of any emotion. Because you're seeing the movement of the irritation or frustration from the space of the self. If you were your irritation, you wouldn't be able to see it, because you'd be kind of lost and spinning in it all the time. But, you know, and we have moments when we are lost and spinning in it. But at a certain point, there's a kind of a stepping back, and there's seeing, you know, this irritation just really had me in a spin. Let me see what this is all about. And, you know, we get so many great insights and lessons when we take the time to have a conversation with these negative emotions that we often feel we shouldn't be having.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where working on the shadow is so important, right? Because for me, because of the work I did on anger, I know that anger is a boundary thing. And so then it's not like, oh, I can't ever be angry.
Yes.
It's like, oh, hi, rage. Yes. Welcome. What did I say yes to that I should have said no to? Like, what? Let me stop for a minute. Think about what I'm doing here. And it becomes like almost funny. And you're not getting into the heaviness, but you're not denying it either. You're not suppressing all the anger because, God, I can't be angry. Instead, you're like, oh, I'm really pissed. What the heck am I doing here? What is it telling me? And I think that's what makes shadow work so empowering.
Yes, because there's usually a need that's not being met when anger comes up. And it's like you said, we've probably, you know, overextended, said yes to something we really don't want to do, feel obliged to do something, or behave in a way that runs counter to our authenticity. You know, so anger really is a fantastic ally, you know, but you have to be ready to recognize that and say, oh, okay, yeah, it's a good thing. It isn't a negative.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I love this like prompt is, when does endurance become a cage? And that really stuck out to me. And it made me think of, you know, that story of the bird in the cage, but the door is open and the bird could really fly out, but it's just staying inside of there. And I think, you know, how often have we been trapped by our own like desire to push forward no matter what? And to just, I'm going to get through this no matter what happens. And man, it really can feel like a cage. I thought that was a really good description.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. And I do have a really I think, appropriate little story that highlights that. You know, and I've shared this a few times in my books, but when I first moved to Grand Bahama in 2004, I was hired to teach art and design at a beautiful little international school, but I was teaching grade 1 all the way through to grade 12. So that's 12
Holy cow.
classes. One of
That's crazy.
Yeah, one of which was IB, the International Baccalaureate. So before I even started, you know, I was handed a folder this thick, you know, with the curriculum and everything that I needed to know. And there was all the documentation for the primary years program. I mean, it just went on and on, right? And it was literally head spinning, because I would have classes that were 35 minutes long, and I was on this rotation. So I'd have a grade 1 class where they could barely tie their shoes and they were, you know, play with wax crayons. And then I'd have a grade 11, or I'd have an IB class, and, you know, middle school. And it was just completely head spinning. And the reason that was given to me was because I didn't have any boundaries at that point. I didn't know anything. You know, I was just really at the beginning of shadow work. So I was literally running around all day long, barely able to catch my breath, barely able to use the restroom, just crazy. It was crazy. And then I'd see other members of staff walking up and down with a cup of coffee. You know, I used to teach, I think it was 35 out of 40 classes a week. And then there's all the attendant paperwork, the marking, and the meetings that went with that, right? And then I would see other members of staff who taught 20 or 15 even. So they would just be just like having a grand time, socializing. And here was me, just like this crazy. The thing is, you know, I just started to take responsibility, because I said, the reason I'm in this place through shadow work is because I don't know how to say no. I didn't know how to create boundaries. I didn't know how to have a conversation about the workload. So what would happen is I'd internalize it and get really frustrated about what other people weren't doing and what I was doing. So it was the best thing ever, actually. But what happened was, you know, as soon as I started to wake up to see the part I was playing in it, then I was able to articulate and say, listen, this has to end, or I'm just checking out of here and I'm going to find another job. So of course it was changed. And, you know, this is the reality, of this is the way the world operates, right? The way, you know, the universe hands us these gifts for us to see our own limitations in terms of our belief system, the way we treat ourselves, our expectations, our beliefs, the, you know, self-negation, oftentimes self-hatred as well, right? So I really learned to express my needs and to honor them. And of course, things changed pretty swiftly as a consequence.
It's inspiring, because I don't know how many women out there watching this go to the gym and you see those women that have beautiful figures and they're on their treadmill doing their little run and they're in perfect little outfits, and think what I think, which is the first thing I do is have that judgment energy of like, oh, well, they have plenty of time to go take care of themselves and do whatever. And it is a I was talking to Denise Maple on her show about self-abandonment, and I'm so good at that. I'm so good at abandoning myself. And that is a real reflection for me, you know, when you're talking about, you know, teaching all those classes and seeing other people who weren't teaching as much and, you know, had space. And I do that a lot with health and wellness, where it's like, well, man, that person, you know, their whole focus is themselves. Like, lucky them. They don't have this or this or this or this.
Yes.
Versus stopping and saying, like, I'm the one who said yes to all those things, and I'm the one who's choosing to ignore myself in, you know, even with all that other stuff. There's a real shift when you start to look at your shadow, where and I think I'm pushing through some of that right now, to be honest, with the health stuff of like, wow, it feels really good to take care of myself. And yeah, probably should have been focusing on this and making time for it. And I had the time, I just was making a different choice. And so it's understanding like why we're not choosing ourselves and starting to choose ourselves first. And it's really hard, especially with kids. It's hard for me to say, no, I'm not going to do that because, for one of the kids, because I'm going to go to the gym or whatever, but I'm such a better person for it, for going
Yes.
on the walk or doing the meditation or doing the weight lifting or whatever it is. And so it's just kind of funny because I think a lot of us have that judgment of the pretty girls who get their eyebrows waxed and their nails done and all those things. And there's judgment about that, but it's because they're choosing themselves. And,
Yes.
and we abandon ourselves. This quote that I found is, caretaking without boundaries is just a slow abandonment of the self.
Yes. Oh, yes. I think I bought the T-shirt and graduated. Look, and the other side of all this too is kind of funny, but for years and years and years, many people who read my books or, I worked with one-on-one or whatever, did courses with, had this idea that I was sitting under a palm tree meditating all day. I mean, I heard it.
Yeah.
I even had a comment from someone who said, "Oh, it's okay for you over there in paradise, in La La Land. It's not like here in the US." And you could just like chill and, have all these experiences. I was like, holy moly, they have no idea that I'm teaching, 40, 50 hours a week and, juggling so much. And at the same time, just, deepening into the recognition of the self and doing the work, even if I couldn't get to meditate, in the mornings, then I'd do japa, I'd repeat a mantra, or I would, try and go into the silence as much as I could during the day and do whatever it was I could do in the schedule I had created for myself. I can't even say I, was handed. And it's, it really reaped great rewards because I was really, I think what happens is the yogis say it's like a pestle and mortar. The ego gets really ground down in situations that are very challenging. And that's certainly what happened in my case, because in many instances, especially when I was teaching with so many classes, I barely had time to be able to prepare. I had to intuitively get a sense of what I needed to do. And I learned to live from that place and to work and speak from that place. And the results have been really amazing as a consequence.
Yeah, it's so good. It makes me think too of just the weight piece. And I talk about it in Enlightenment Pie, but the weight on our body is the exhaustion from the over giving, the caretaking, the being the strong one, the holding it all together, the I'm going to get everything done no matter what. And it's classic for me when I get too busy and take on too much and navigating emotional stuff, like the first thing that happens is I gain weight. And I think it's a very interesting exercise to look at your weight. And the weight doesn't have to be physical weight. There's all sorts of ways to have weight. But there's a weight to exhaustion. Like
yes.
When you're vibrant and your vitality is high, there isn't weight. And, and that exhaustion comes from these masks. This, I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be the best. I'm going to move through this. And it becomes challenging and exhausting and heavy.
Yes. Well, with respect to weight, specifically, I go the other way. When I'm really stressed and feel like I'm really stretched thin, I don't eat. I can't eat. And so I end up losing weight and then feeling frazzled. So I have to make sure I'm a little and often kind of eater. But, and thankfully I have genes, my family fairly skinny and I can eat fairly well and not gain weight. But
Michelle's in agreement with you. Michelle says she also tends to lose weight.
Yeah, so it shows up differently for all of us. But the feeling is the same. There's still weight. Even if you're losing weight, there's a weight to not having boundaries and trying to be the strong one and to keep going and all of those things. You just literally wear yourself out. And something will manifest, because, you know, a few times I've thought, oh, I can't keep doing this. I can't go on like this. I have to kind of, you know, put a stop to it, because you know what's around the corner. If you're not taking care of yourself, some physical ailment will manifest.
It's so true. I have a self-inquiry prompt for everybody, which is, what part of me am I silencing in the name of resilience?
Oh, and wow.
It gives me goosebumps, Julie. What part of me am I silencing in the name of resilience?
Well, I can really speak to that one, actually.
Do it.
You know, again, I think I got the master's degree and the PhD and the T-shirt and the trophy, and just, you know, being the kind of the silent one, the one that was strong and continued and just was never articulating my needs and never speaking up, you know, and all of that comes from a lack of self-worth and feeling like, especially in the workplace, you know, if you complain, if you speak up, if you ask for whatever it is for yourself, you might be in danger of losing your job, or, you know, that you'll be thought less of, or whatever the stories you're telling yourself. And it's just so easy to imbibe those beliefs, especially from parents who, you know, maybe haven't had the greatest, I want to say luck, but that's the wrong word. You know, if they haven't been professionals, if they haven't had the greatest success in terms of their working life and their financial status and all of those things. So that was very much in my psyche because of coming out of a working class environment. But, you know, even if you come from people that have done really really well and been really successful, it might be that there's pressure on you to perform and to earn really amazing money and always be great. So either way, it's very easy to just keep denying yourself, not speaking up for yourself, and then putting up with things that you really know run counter to, you know, optimal health and well-being.
Yeah, I mean, I also have like lots of thoughts about all of that, you know, and I think what I would offer too is, you know, getting silent with yourself instead of being silent outward to everyone. Because I think that's my personality, is I just kind of keep going, and I might get angry or frustrated, but I don't, or I have a challenge like getting quiet and asking myself, like, what is underneath all of that? And I think when you do that and you start to look at, wow, you know, I really didn't think through what I took on.
Yes.
And here's what I feel about it. Or I really wanted to take something on, but it didn't really fit into, you know, the world that I was in. And there's a lot of examples, but I think, you know, it's just being willing to be silent with yourself instead of silent outwardly, where you're shutting down and putting up those walls so that you can just keep going, because that does inevitably turn into a blowout at some point.
Yes. And also, specifically with respect to work, I know it's not just in the teaching profession. I'm sure it runs across all professions, where you are asked to do something, but you're not given the full picture. So you say yes to something and then realize, oh, there's all these added responsibilities. Before you know it, you're kind of overwhelmed, you know, thinking that you said yes to something that's fairly small, and then it becomes this huge monster. And that, I think, is certainly common in teaching, and it's probably true of other professions. And it can be very tricky when you've said yes to something to then challenge, you know, a boss or, you know, a supervisor about what's actually been going on, because that's really manipulative behavior. And these kinds of practices are commonplace in the workplace.
Oh, they totally are. You look at my resume. I mean, 25 years in fashion retail, and I would say, yeah, I'm the fixer-upper. I clean up stores. I make everything better. I can do it. I'll do it. And then I get into the big mess and I clean it all up. And I'm completely exhausted and I'm burnout and I quit.
Yes.
I don't stay.
Yes.
I didn't work at the same brand for 25 years. Let me tell you, I worked at 20 brands over 25 years. And that's a great example of just saying yes. And I did do it. I did fix the stores. I did get the better teams. I did get the results they were looking for, but it was not sustainable at all. And that goes back to that overcommitting, and then you become so exhausted and you can't do it anymore. And then you can't keep the consistency. I think that's something that I was never able to master, was being able to sustain that kind of energy, to stay consistent enough. And then it holds you back from other things, bigger positions you could have had, more financial security. There's all these things that come along with it. And so it's a real thing to unravel. I mean, it really is. This whole idea of endurance and resiliency. I'm so glad we're talking about it, Julie, because it is worth the 3 episodes we're talking about.
Yes.
The shadow side of it, because it is so challenging we want to do big things. We want to accomplish things, and then sustaining it is just absolutely the hard part if it's not coming from a place of, abundance and vitality, if it's coming from a place of like fixing, doing, caregiving, overgiving, even just talking about it's like, oh God, it's just exhausting.
Yes. And also there's another part to all of this as well. And that is, you have supervisors or bosses that take advantage and manipulate when they know that you're the strong one and you'll endure and you'll keep going and you'll just keep fighting through and pushing through. They'll just throw more and more and more onto you with no respect at all. It's not like you'll get credit or, a bonus for the most. It's certainly not in teaching. You don't get anything else. You're just the donkey, And then, of course, the frustration and anger is even more compounded. I mean, I have a great story that, I think is worth sharing here, that when Anthony and I after we left the ashram, we went to the Ukraine, and we were working in 2 international schools in the Ukraine, one in Dnipropetrovsk in the southeastern part of the Ukraine, and then one in Kiev. And when we went to Kiev, it's Kiev now, isn't it? Or Kiev. We'd been there for a term or so, and I was called into a meeting, and I was told that the teacher who was teaching business studies to a pretty advanced level, it was an exam level, kind of like an AP level, had been fired. And they said to me, we need you to teach business, on top of everything else that I was doing, teaching art and English and all of those things. And I was kind of in the throes of doing shadow work. So thankfully, I said, absolutely no way. First of all, I don't know anything about how to teach this curriculum business. I've got no interest in it at all. They gave me a textbook this thick. I said I would be reading a chapter ahead of the students the night before. And, you can kind of do it up to a point. But if they ask me questions that are not in a text, I'm screwed. And I'm not, these are fee-paying parents. They're paying good money for their child to get, a top education. And I would be a sham and a scam, standing there pretending I know what I'm talking about. So I said, no way, I'm not doing it. And I was so proud of myself. And of course, they moved on to somebody else. They had another sucker to do it. But I said, wow, these things just happen all the time. Because I think you have something on your forehead. Ask me to do anything and I'll do it. You know what I mean? If you don't have boundaries in place.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. It just never ends. And I think, as we come to the close today, I want to leave everyone with some ways to reflect on this, but also just, what do you do? Like, how do you take that mask off, And I think for me, yoga has become such a powerful vehicle for me. And I think it's worth noting that, in Ayurveda, the Pitta dosha, it's the fire energy. It's very human nature like to be Pitta about it and go do these power yoga classes and drive yourself even more with your I'm going to be strong, trying to heal from something. So I would just offer, for me, yoga looks like hatha yoga, slow, gentle, but fierce, intense, but you're not doing a whole lot. But for me, the physical activity is a big energy mover for me to kind of clear out the anger, clear out what I'm carrying, help me to think through things. It's actually really, really hard for me to sit and meditate. So for those of you who think that I'm also sitting someplace meditating in the Rocky Mountains, it's not the case. It's really hard for me to just sit and be still. And so the movement is like one of my tools. But Julie, what are some of your tools nowadays to kind of look at some of this, or when things are starting to feel too much?
Yeah, likewise, moving. I went and did a Pilates class this morning. I'm doing one every single, morning for the next, I don't know how, while I'm on vacation. And taking walks and swimming. So because what happens is when I'm moving and I'm just focusing on breathing, or I'm looking at the sky, then the mind, because the yogis say, the mind becomes still and takes rest in the heart. So that's fantastic. It's kind of like a moving meditation, actually, for me. And then the other thing that I've found has been a lifesaver has been journaling, and particularly when I was dealing with the shadows. So just utilizing a journal, writing things down, and asking questions inside my journal, and, asking for kind of answers and insights and all those things. And that was really helpful. And, because I mean, let's face it, I don't think many people have time to sit and meditate for 3 hours. If you've got like a normal kind of working life and you've got responsibilities. So for me, the simplest, the better. So definitely exercise, journaling, and then also just paying attention to what emotions are coming up, especially the fiery ones and the ones that I'd rather not deal with. That's been that's been incredible.
Yeah, I'm grateful. Like Scott, my husband, and I have gotten really good at like pointing out, like, oh, what's coming out of you? Where's that coming from? And instead of it turning into a whole thing, it becomes kind of funny. And it's like, oh, I guess I better go sit down with my journal. And yes. My dog is a godsend. I mean, my dog Ludwig, I have to walk him. And it's just so great because walking my dog on our trail, we see in the last couple of weeks, we've seen deer, we've seen wild turkeys, we saw ducks. And it's just nice to get outside and just sort of, and there's an innocence, I'm not, I'm a step parent, so I don't have my own babies, but I imagine if I had a baby, it would be similar to my dog in that there's an innocence to when they see something or notice something. And it just takes you to a different space where you can release some of the pressure of what you're taking on in your life. And I really do like, there's an exercise where you just make a pie chart of your life and what is taking up your time. And it's such a simple exercise, but it's thinking about, well, how much of this pie chart is me versus all of the commitments that are for other people.
Yes. And work usually will take up a big chunk of that. And if you're doing something where you're having to mask up all the time and present in a way that isn't authentic, the weight of that is really terrible.
I agree. I felt that a lot in retail because you have to kind of take on the brand you work for. And if it's not you, and I definitely have become more quick at noticing it. But I think it's important. I think this is the first time this last couple month is the first time in 46 years of my life where I actually said no and said, I can't look and care about that thing, that brand, like I want to. I just can't anymore. Yeah. And I think that was a big step for me. So, I think it's important for everybody to realize as we close out today, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel all the destructive emotions as much as the positive ones. And it's okay to ask for help and to surrender as much as it's okay to say no to helping others too. If you're not able to do it, there's actually really great ways to just say, I don't have the space to help you when the friend reaches out. There are actually some really great communication support tools out there for those of you that do have a hard time saying no, especially to best friends. We don't want to say no. And, I've been lucky that the relationships I have today, I can say I don't have the space for that today, but, check in with me another day kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's perfectly well said, Lisa. I'm not sure I can add anything other than feel the feels. That's a great term, I think, but it's really appropriate. And if anger keeps coming up, especially with respect to the workplace, there's an invitation there, to look at what is underneath it and what is it really saying to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So Julie, tomorrow, I'm in my old podcast brain. Yes. Tomorrow we're going to do part 3, which is about shadow work and transmuting resilience into wholeness. So tomorrow is going to be a really, really juicy episode. And Julie literally wrote the book on that. So I'm excited to talk about that tomorrow. And just a reminder to everyone that all of our information to contact us is in the show notes. Julie, any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would just say to everybody who's listening, keep it real. Don't discount yourself and what you're feeling because you think you shouldn't be feeling that because of you've been on a spiritual path for however long. All of that is really nonsense. The important thing is to honor everything. Everything is included, and everything is an ally. So that's, welcome it all, no matter how it looks, no matter how it feels, even if it's uncomfortable. Just welcome it all.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Julie, for coming today again. And we'll be back, everyone, same time, same place tomorrow to wrap up this first 3-part series. And then we'll be back to talk about the gifts of resilience next month. So we will see you all here tomorrow. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.